The next official D&D book, Arcana Unleashed, is coming soon, and guess what? I got to take a look at 4 of the new subclasses that we are going to get with this book, and so today I'm going to do a multi-class build with 2 of them, the Mystic Arts Monk and the Transmuter Wizard. Together, they're going to make a pretty fun and unique Gish, so I hope you'll stick around for the deep dive. Welcome to D4. Hey everybody, so here at D4, I like to do character builds for my favorite role-playing games. I like to crunch numbers about them, I like to theorycraft about them, not so that I can tell you the right or the best way to play a character, but to explore one potential way to build something in the hopes of creating a character that is both powerful, yes, but also fun to play. So if you also enjoy creating characters for your favorite role-playing games, or if you're just interested in theory crafting, or if you're looking for tips or ideas on how to build something that you're thinking about playing, then welcome home. This is where you belong, and I'm so glad you're here, and I'm so glad I'm here. Back from vacation. My name's Colby, by the way. And so, yeah, let's jump in. So, Arcana Unleashed. A lot of you probably know by now that Wizards of the Coast has given a bunch of us content creators early access to some of the book. And I should mention here, right, that yes, they have and will be giving me early access, which I appreciate, but they in no way have any say in what I say about it here. No approval process I need to go through or anything. Just so long as I stick to my NDA. Anyways, we will supposedly be getting full access later, but for now, it's just been like a few feats, a couple of monsters, a couple of factions, a couple of backgrounds, and then, yes, 4 of the 8 new subclasses that we are going to get with the book. We've gotten to see so far the Arcane Archer Fighter, the brand new Vestige Patron Warlock, both of which I will for sure be doing builds for, don't worry. And then, yes, the Mystic Arts Monk and the Transmuter Wizard. For what it's worth, the other subclasses that we will get in the book are the Arcana Domain Cleric, and then just 3 additional wizard subclasses. I know, wizards get all the love, but hey, they are called Wizards of the Coast, after all. And the book is called Arcana Unleashed. Anyways, those are the Conjurer, Enchanter, and Necromancer wizards. So, I'm not going to do a whole, reaction to the new book or anything today. Maybe I'll do another collaboration with someone else for that once we get full access, right? Kind of like I did with Kelly and Monty for the Ravenloft book up there. But no, I look at what we've seen so far and I say, oh my gosh, more Gish options must build. Especially when one of them is for my favorite class, the Monk, and it's finally, at long last, a 1/3 caster Monk option. First of its kind, officially anyways, in D&D 5 or 5.5. That said, I need to warn you, the build that I put together today is actually, for most of its career anyways, going to be mostly, if you can believe it, a Transmuter Wizard, because yeah, Transmuters got some fun toys to play with that can make them pretty decent melee combatants themselves now with a hefty multi-class investment anyways. And I kind of love that. A wizard Gish that isn't a Bladesinger? Impossible! And so yeah, for only the second time in this channel's history, I believe, the first being that Bladesinger Monk that I did years ago, right up there, I'm going to do a slightly crazy mashup of a Monk and a Wizard. It's a bit mad on multiple levels, right? But I think it can work pretty well. And more than anything, I'm just really curious to see how it stacks up when I crunch the numbers. So just FYI, I'm giving myself 1 rule and 1 rule only with the build today. No fighter levels. Not a single dip. As tempting as it will be, but we will have some ways to pick up some things that we usually want from fighter without needing to go fighter. So no, I'm gonna try to do this without cheating, right? So let's just jump in to D&D Build number 262, the Wizard Monk. This isn't my final form. Jean-Claude Van Damme. The spell Claw, Altered Beast. The Somatic Component, that's clever. The Flesh Dancer, Key Hulk, Mage Hands. Kung Fu Panda works pretty well, actually. The Moon Mage is fantastic. Thanks, as always, to everyone in the Discord server who's offering up suggestions. They're fantastic. I think my favorite this week was from Onslaught, who came up with the Werewizard. Huge thanks to my good friend Randall Hampton for the fantastic artwork that he put together for the build this week. He does this every week. He's so good. Really captures the essence of kind of the look and feel of this build, I think. If you'd be interested in following him to check out the other stuff that he does, or maybe even trying to reach out to commission him to create some art for your character or even your entire party, I will put links in the video description as always on how to do so. And before we get to the build, you all love third-party content creators, right? I know you do. How about third-party stuff coming from a father and son team filled with awesome new classes and subclasses to play that is D&D 5.5 compatible? Come on, you want this to succeed just for the feels, right? I know I do. Plus, it looks fantastic. I'm talking about the sponsor for today's video, the currently in Kickstarter, Teos's Library of Everything from 5e Family. All right, so this book is compact but dense and super straightforward. 60 pages of new player options, 2 brand new classes with 4 subclasses each, plus 24 additional subclasses. That's 2 for every single existing official class. So first up, the new classes. We've got the Operative, who's a bare-knuckle brawler that uses their wit as well as their fists, crafting cunning gadgets to aid them in battle. They always have the right tool for the job. Feels a bit like an Artificer-Monk hybrid, and I am all in on that concept. And then you've got the Shaman, who channels spirits and nature through their conduits, which provide powerful effects for the Shaman and their allies to always have the upper hand in battle. It sounds to me like maybe more of a buff-focused support style character, maybe akin to the World of Warcraft Shaman with all of their totems, for those who played that game. Just a guess there, but it's a super fun play style, no doubt, to be throwing down buffs for yourself and your party all the time. The subclasses all sound fantastic as well, from the Path of the Viking Barbarian to the Outlander Ranger, from the Outlaw Rogue to the Blood Magic Wizard. The art here is great and all human-made, and yeah, it's a passion project from a father and son team, named actually after the son's first D&D character, Teos. It has been thoroughly playtested and is now just waiting for your support to make it a reality, so hey, if you love new player options, do yourself a favor, go check it out. There are only a few days left on the Kickstarter, so help them hit their next stretch goal before it's too late. Okay, big thanks to 5e Family, I love your story, and I can't wait to see this thing in print. Let's get back to the build. All right, level 1 for our starting class. Yeah, we're going wizard, I know. No fighter at level 1, incredible. But like I said, there are a few reasons why skipping fighter on the build today doesn't feel so bad, all of which we will get into as we go. For now, yeah, I think we should probably be laying the groundwork for this kind of abnormal multi-class, right? With our backstory, for sure. Else, it might feel really weird for this character to be taking monk levels later. So what is this character's story? Do they simply study at a monastery of other mystic arts monks where they first receive an education in the arcane before moving on to meld their understanding of the arcane with their physical form? I would strongly encourage you to work this out with your DM, figure it out, as you always should, in my opinion, but maybe especially where a multi-class might feel a bit odd, potentially, right? As for our species, I'm going to say let's go Goliath and take the Hill Giant ancestry. I often do Goliath. You don't have to, of course. I mean, the shifter species is right there, melding perfectly with our character conceptually, right? And, shifters get some great benefits. Anything else will work fine too. I just really like the ability that Hill Giant, specifically Goliaths, have to attempt to knock an enemy prone, proficiency bonus times per day, so long as that enemy is large or smaller, without even getting to save against it. Very nice for those of us that will be melee attackers so that we can get easy advantage. As for our background, I say take an old one or a custom one if you can, but if not, Mulhorandi Tomb Raider will work great since it gives us the ability score increases we want and the origin feat, which, yeah, is lucky as it so often is, so that we can, again, proficiency bonus times per day, spend a luck point to give ourselves advantage on a d20 test of our choice. Great to help us get advantage on attacks, potentially, and other things, of course. And as always, yeah, take something else if you want, you'll be fine. Huff might be sort of my backup go-to here, since more hit points are always nice, and as a primarily d6 hit die character, we're gonna be a little squishy. For our starting ability scores, I assume we go the point buy method as always and say let's take a 15 intelligence and a +2 there, a 13 constitution and a +1, then a 14 dexterity and a 13 wisdom. This is one of the biggest challenges of multi-classing wizard and monk, of course. It's so very mad multi-ability score dependent. I would really love to have every one of those scores higher. Only a 13 wisdom is particularly painful, but we will need intelligence, dexterity, and constitution more than we will need wisdom for this build, so alas, it kind of goes by the wayside. As for our starting equipment, let's go with a light crossbow and then a quarterstaff, I think, for use with True Strike primarily, especially during these first few levels. But then as a Wizard 1, we get Ritual Adept, which lets us cast any ritual spell in our spellbook from our spellbook without needing to otherwise prepare the spell. Incredibly handy. Make sure you grab as many ritual spells as you can learn or scribe along the way, right? We also get Arcane Recovery, which lets us once per day after a short rest recover spent spell slots equal to half our Wizard level rounded down. Speaking of spells, right, which ones should we be grabbing here? I'm going to say True Strike for offense right now, like I've said, letting us make a weapon attack, but then using our intelligence for the hit and damage modifiers. Very nice, and adding a little bit more damage once we hit level 5 and beyond, right? We're going to want Shield and Absorb Elements for reactionary defensive boosts, and maybe more importantly for our build today, Mage Armor, which lasts for 8 hours and lets our AC be 13 plus our Dexterity modifier, right? That's not great, but it's better than anything else we'll be able to do for, unfortunately, the entire build. Yeah, definitely a weakness of the character, no doubt. And makes me think, maybe we should have gone on Shifter after all, right? We are going to be pretty squishy, though we will have some decent ways to bolster our defense with reactions, the shield spell, and more later on. I'd probably grab Sleep and or Hideous Laughter for some solid control, and finally, as always, we need a familiar for scouting purposes and also to potentially get us advantage on our first attack when we have the familiar take the help action. You know who takes the help action with me every single day? My patrons and channel members, and I just want to give them a quick shout out. If you don't mind, you guys, thank you so much for your support of me and of this channel. I could not do what I do without you, and it means the world to me, so thank you. If you're not a member or a patron, I'd love it if you'd consider becoming one. There's a button down there that says join. If you click on it or go to the Patreon link in the video description, you'll learn about all of the perks that I give my members and patrons, which include access to the library of write-ups that I make for each of these builds to help you recreate them yourself a little more easily, access to the community Discord server, and access to the live monthly Q&A hangout sessions that we have. The last one of which I did with Will from D&D Shorts when I was in England, which was a lot of fun. Just so you know, I give all of my perks to all of my members and patrons, regardless of like the level they sign up at, just as long as it's silver or higher, which is like a couple bucks a month. And I just ask that you pay, what you think it's worth and what you feel you can afford. But if you don't think it's worth even that and or can't afford it, that's fine. I'm glad you're here. So thanks for watching. Liking and subscribing especially are also great ways to support. So thanks. All right. At level 2, as a wizard, we get Scholar, which lets us gain one more intelligence-based skill proficiency and gives us expertise in that skill. And that's it. I guess we get another first level spell slot. Fear not, because level 3 is one of the best. We get our subclass first of all. And like I've said, we're going with Transmuter. And you know what? I have never, in the 6 years I have had this channel doing D&D builds, used a Transmuter wizard in a build before. There's something I don't get to say very often, so I am super excited about doing this today. Now, unfortunately, due to the NDA I've signed with Wizards of the Coast, I'm not allowed to show you the pages from the book here. I'll just have to read off the text, and you'll have to take my word for it that this is what it actually says. Don't worry, we will be able to show actual book pages before too long, but for now, yes, here's what we get for flavor text for the Transmuter. Transform energy and matter. You study spells that modify energy and matter. To you, the world is eminently mutable. Using your magic, you become a smith at reality's forge. Some transmuters are tinkerers and pranksters. Others seek the power to make and destroy worlds. Dang, that sounds pretty powerful. Let's see if the abilities live up to the hype, shall we? As a transmuter, we get three whole features. First up, Transmutation Savant. Just like most wizard subclasses, we get to learn 2 new transmutation spells for free of 2nd level or lower, and then every time we gain access to a new level of wizard spells, we can learn 1 more for free. Very nice. For now, I'd probably take 2 of Jump, Longstrider, for movement buffs, Magic Weapon, if one of your weapon-using companions doesn't have a magic weapon yet, and Spider Climb for some nice movement and utility. We then get the new and improved Transmuter's Stone feature. Dang, this is good now. It was already pretty good. Now it's even better. It lets us create a tiny little stone that can be used as a spellcasting focus, and then whoever is in possession of it just straight up has proficiency in Constitution saving throws all the time now. I would not be sharing this with a friend personally, because that's huge, especially for those of us constantly concentrating on spells, right? And we will be. In addition, we get to choose one of the following benefits that we can even swap out when we cast a transmutation spell with a spell slot. They are Dark Vision, out to 60 feet. I would recommend that if you want Goliath for sure, but there's also a bump to speed, like our movement, by 10 feet, or resistance to an elemental damage type of your choice. We used to have to wait for this feature until 6th level, and it only gave one benefit, Constitution saving throw proficiency, the obvious choice, right, or one of the others. So huge upgrade here. Finally, we get my favorite feature, one that replaces the old minor alchemy, which could be fun and useful and even potentially powerful, depending on the player and the table and the situation, but I personally vastly prefer the new wondrous alteration feature. This says that we always have the alter self spell prepared and can cast it once per day without spending a spell slot. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. Wait, alter self sucks. And generally speaking, I'd agree with you, outside of its potential utility uses. But now, for transmuters, I would say au contraire, mon frère, because we get some special bonuses when we cast the spell in every form that we choose for it. If we use the aquatic form, we can take the dash action as a bonus action while underwater, okay if we need it. If we use change appearance, then we get advantage on deception checks while we're changed, and that's great if that's what we're using it for. But of course, my favorite thing is that if we use the natural weapons option, where we're growing claws or hooves or horns, right, and getting to make unarmed strikes with a D6 and use our spellcasting modifier to hit and damage instead of strength, we get to do 2d6 damage with our unarmed strikes, and we have advantage on concentration checks. Holy cow. Suddenly, the hardest unarmed striker in the game? Yeah, you know why I'm going where I'm going with this build, don't you? Because keep in mind, when we grow claws, for example, right, the alter self spell simply changes the damage of our unarmed strikes. But it's all of our unarmed strikes, not just like unarmed strikes with our attack action or anything. And hey, even though it's an action to cast, the spell lasts an hour, so it's not too big a stretch to assume that we will have it going when combat starts. And though going into melee combat is a little risky as a wizard, with mage armor, the shield spell, constitution saving throw proficiency, and advantage on concentration checks, heck, it's almost like we got 2 feats here, resilient constitution and warcaster. Not quite, but still. I think it's worth the risk. And hey, we're not done yet. Best level ever, like I said, because yeah, we get 2nd level wizard spells here too. And there's some that could bolster our defense even further. Blur, though that requires concentration, but mirror image doesn't. I'd probably want Misty Step to teleport when we need to, and Hold Person and Web for control as well, when you can afford to use them and or, want to switch out your tactics to be a controller for a while. All right, at level 4. Yes, now that we've got all of those sweet, sweet upgraded transmuter features, of course I want to start taking monk levels. You could put it off for another level if you really wanted to grab, that feat at Wizard 4, but personally I think it's slightly more important to start getting monk features, extra attack, etc. So that's what we're going to be doing here, meaning we would be a monk 1. And as such, we get martial arts first up, which says that so long as we are wielding only monk weapons or making unarmed strikes and not wearing armor or using a shield, we can do a few things that we don't really care about for this build and make an unarmed strike as a bonus action every round. And we love making more unarmed strikes, don't we? We also get unarmored defense, but yeah, speaking of features we don't care about, this lets our armor class be equal to 10 plus our dexterity modifier plus our wisdom modifier, but alas, that would actually be worse than mage armor and always will be for us, unless we could find a magic item that would give a big boost to our wisdom modifier. Such is the mad life of the wizard monk. Let's not dwell on it. At level 5, we would be a monk 2, and that means we get Monk's Focus, which gives us 1 focus point per monk level, recovered on a short rest, and lets us spend them to do one of 3 different things. Step of the Wind and Patient Defense to dash as a bonus action, disengage as a bonus action, or dash and disengage, or disengage and dodge if we spend a focus point, right? And then the most important of all, yes, Flurry of Blows to make 2 unarmed strikes instead of 1 if we've got a focus point to spend on it. We also get Unarmored Movement, which increases our speed by 10 more feet if we're unarmored and unshielded. That would be 45 feet as a Goliath. And hey, if we wanted to, just for kicks, we could make it 55 if we took the speed option on our Transmuter Stone, right? Vroom vroom. Finally, at this level, we get Uncanny Metabolism, which lets us once per long rest recover all of our spent focus points and heal ourselves a bit when we roll initiative. So great. At level 6, we would be a Monk 3, and that means we get Deflect Attacks, which says that we can use our reaction when hit by an attack to reduce any bludgeoning, piercing, or slashing damage dealt to us by a d10 plus our dexterity modifier and our monk level, and then spend a focus point if we reduce the damage to 0 to potentially do some damage to an enemy, and this will be a nice option to have for those times when the shield spell won't help, right? whether because the roll to hit us was too high, or we got crit, or we otherwise don't have or don't want to use spell slots for shield. But then we get our monk subclass. And of course, as I've said, we're going with Warrior of the Mystic Arts. Now, before we jump into the subclass, a couple of notes. I'm excited to have a monk third caster option, finally. I am. Spells are awesome. That said, the Dungeon Dude's Arcane Hand Monk is better, mechanically. So if third-party content is allowed at your table, I would recommend that over this personally. I did a build for it right up there. If you missed it and you want to find out about it, it's fantastic and I love it. Also, the reality is that the main reason I'm taking this subclass for this build is, well, because it's new and I want to show it off a bit. And also because it'll help us keep our spell slots progressing a little bit. Generally speaking though, we're not going to get a ton from the subclass otherwise, and so if you'd rather take a different subclass here, you wouldn't lose much and you'd gain in other ways. So sure, consider Mercy or Open Hand or Elements or whatever else if you really want. I absolutely will be doing a build for too long that's mostly Mystic Arts Monk. Today we're more interested in the Monk base class features than we are in any one subclass, okay? All of that said, a monk caster subclass option, finally. Hooray. I wish it were a little stronger, but of course I do. Monks are never good enough for me, are they? All right, let's get into some of the details here. First up, the flavor text. It says this: weave martial and mystic arts. Warriors of the mystic arts wield magic to supplement their martial skill. They harness mystical focus to enhance their magical and physical abilities. How's it? Okay, pretty straightforward, I guess. So they only get one single feature at this level, and it's spells. Pretty great feature as features go, but yeah, I would have loved to at least see some kind of ribbon here. Oh well. And those spells that we get are from the sorcerer spell list, though we get to use our wisdom modifier for the spellcasting ability, and that's awesome. Of course, again, for us, crappy wisdom. We get a couple of cantrips and a couple of first level spells, and I'd basically just be grabbing stuff that works regardless of your spellcasting ability modifier, right? Blade Ward would be nice if you weren't or couldn't concentrate on Alter Self for whatever reason. Maybe you're out of second level spell slots, right? And the free use of it. But go ahead and just pick your favorites here for the spells. Okay, at level 6, it is time for our first damage report. So let's talk about what combat might ideally look like for us at this level. First, I'm going to assume that when combat starts, we've got Alter Self going. That won't always be the case, of course, but considering that it lasts an hour, I don't think it's too big a stretch. Every round, then, we're going to be doing basically the same thing, running up to our target and making a true strike attack against them with our quarterstaff. Wait, what? I thought this was an Alter Self build. I know, it is. It's just that right now, since we don't have extra attack yet, we do ever so slightly more damage with True Strike and a quarterstaff, since the quarterstaff, if held with two hands, right, and why not, would do a d8 of damage, and then True Strike, ever since level 5, is adding a d6 of damage too, so it's a 1d8 plus 1d6 as opposed to 2d6. You don't have to do this, but especially if you've got a magic quarterstaff or wanted to cast magic weapon on the staff, sure, go for it. I'm not going to assume that we've got a magic weapon. Now, thankfully, we no longer have to take the attack action first in order to use Flurry of Blows like we used to back in the 5e days, right? So after our True Strike, we'd spend a focus point, if we had one, to Flurry of Blows, hitting for 2d6 plus 3 with each hit. I will assume that on the first attack we've got advantage from either our familiar or with a luck point, and that we're knocking them prone with a Hill Goliath Tumble, so we'll have advantage on all of our attacks. On round 4, we'd be relying on our luck points, so hopefully, you've got that familiar giving you advantage on your first attack. And since we're only a monk 3, we'd also be out of focus points by round 4, so only one unarmed strike that round instead of flurry, right? During those first 3 rounds, though, we're hitting fairly hard, potentially doing 1d8 plus 5d6 plus 9 damage if everything lands. And so, averaged over 4 rounds of combat, against enemies with a 10 AC, we would do 30 damage per round, and against a 15 AC, it would be 26 DPR. And yeah, okay, fine. That's not stellar. What did you expect for a level 6 character who's only 3 in one class and 3 in another? The challenge here is that a pure monk at level 6 would be actually outperforming this build, but it doesn't make sense for us to start monk with this build because Alter Self uses our spellcasting modifier for the hit and damage. We don't get a choice, right? We don't get to use Dex if we want. Not the way the spell is worded, at least. Rules is written. Otherwise, sure, we could start monk and go to level 5 and focus on dexterity, right? As is, we want to prioritize intelligence if we want to build around alter self, and start wizard to get alter self. And so yeah, without extra attack yet, we're a bit behind the curve, even with those harder hitting unarmed strikes, meaning that, compared to other DPR builds that I've done to date, we're like mid tier 4 territory here. We're building a base to be better later. And we will be, but early on, it might feel a little wonky as we find our footing. So hey, maybe consider using web as often as, or more often even than alter self, right? And just like peppering your enemies with a couple of attacks per round. I mean, heck, your team might be better off that route anyways. We've got lots of spells, lots of cool monk stuff, some decent defense, and it's gonna get much better very soon, so just hang with me. Okay, at level 7, we would be a monk 4, and that means we get slow fall first up, which lets us use our reaction to reduce any falling damage that we might take by 5 times our monk level. Very cool. And then we get our first general feat. And I'm actually just gonna say, pick your favorite +1 to intelligence feat here. I wish there was something that stood out as like really helping the build, but for me, there kind of isn't. If we were going to be using True Strike or some other form of radiant damage for longer, then yeah, Spellfire Adept could be fun. We don't really need Warcaster, right? Because Alter Self gives advantage on concentration checks, so sure. Grab Fey or Shadow Touched for a free Misty Step or free invisibility and then another first level spell, or Telekinetic if you want to move stuff with your mind and with a bonus action. Skill Expert wouldn't be a bad choice even for another proficiency and expertise. Just make sure you get that intelligence to 18. But at level 8 we would be a monk 5 finally, so we can get, Stunning Strike first to try and stun our target when we hit them by spending a focus point and forcing them to make a Constitution save. Since the DC of that save is based on our Wisdom modifier, yeah, unfortunately, I don't think we're going to get a ton of mileage out of Stunning Strike on this build. But then there is extra attack, so we can make 2 attacks instead of 1 when we take the attack action, meaning no more True Strike, which we'll gladly trade. Okay, at level 9, we've got a choice to make. Do we stay with Monk or go back to Wizard? If we stayed Monk, we'd get the very nice Mystic Focus ability that Mystic Monks get. It basically lets us trade Monk Focus points to recover spent spell slots, and then we can spend spell slots to get focus points. And then there's the even better Mystic Fighting Style, which, similar to Blade Singers and Valor Bards and Eldritch Knights, lets us replace one of our attack action attacks with a cantrip. Seems like the obvious choice, except for the fact that it specifies that the spell we replace our attack with has to be a sorcerer cantrip specifically, which makes me very, very sad. Because typically, right, you could replace the attack with, say, True Strike or Booming Blade and get a little extra damage out of it, but since we would be making that cantrip attack with our Wisdom modifier as a sorcerer cantrip, then it would be bad for us, as we've been focusing on intelligence. And yeah, you probably could have done something like find a way to get Shillelagh, maybe with your origin feat, but make intelligence what we use Shillelagh for, right? And then we can be making an intelligence-based quarterstaff attack, even with a sorcerer booming blade cantrip that's supposed to be using our wisdom modifier. But Shillelagh is tough, because it takes a bonus action to cast and it only lasts for a minute. And I know at some tables you can just be like, I'm always casting Shillelagh every minute on the minute, and then when combat starts you don't have to use your bonus action, but like, that just feels kind of icky for me to make assumptions around. So I'm not going to go that route. And yeah, we needed to focus on intelligence in order to get the most out of Alter Self, which I've already talked about. It's sort of the thing that I'm building this whole character around in the first place. So here we are, not getting much for this build out of that, replace an attack with a cantrip feature. Now, sure, there are other things worth pursuing. In Monk, a third unarmed strike with flurry of blows, not least of them, but for me, with our intelligence focus especially, I think we get a lot more from just going back to Wizard. Also, there is an amazing feature at Transmuter level 10 that I really want to play with, so yeah, back to Wizard we go. Meaning we would be a Wizard 4 now, so we can pick up another feat, and I would just bump intelligence here by 2, capping it at 20. And that's just in time for our next damage report. Okay, since last check, we've increased our intelligence modifier twice, capped it, sweet, plus picked up a 4th attack per round from extra attack, more focus points so we can flurry every round, and a proficiency bonus bump for more knocking prone and luck points even, and some additional utility and control potential as well. But at this level, averaged over 4 rounds against an enemy with a 10 armor class, we would do 51 DPR, and against a 16 AC, it would be 46 damage per round. All right, that's much better. Compared to other damage-focused builds that I've done to date at this level, we're more like middle of tier 3, so we've gone up a whole tier. It's respectable. It's not topping the charts or anything, but it's solid, fun, and cool. You're making 4 unarmed strikes with like your claws or your horns every single round. You're packing a ton of spell slots for decent survivability, potential control, and lots of fantastic utility. So we're bringing a lot to the table here, even if we might not be blowing the doors off of the DPR, right? So the question is, where do we go from here? At level 10, we would be a Wizard 5, and that means we get Memorize Spell, which lets us swap out a leveled spell for preparation purposes, right, with every short rest. That's handy. And then, yes, we get 3rd level Wizard spells. The transmutation ones to consider, I think, would be Blink for defensive purposes, Fly, Haste, and Slow. There's some really nice 3rd level options, right? But then, yeah, the usuals. Counterspell, Dispel Magic, Fireball, of course, Hypnotic Pattern, and or Fear. Have fun. At level 11, we would be a Wizard 6, and Transmuters get Empowered Transmutation. Now, it's brand new, and it's nice. It says that when we cast a transmutation spell that doesn't make an attack roll or force a save, you can increase the spell's effective level by 1. We can do this intelligence modifier times per day. So yeah, cast Fly and hit another ally with it for free, right? Or upgrade someone's magic weapon to +2 by only using a 2nd level spell slot instead of a 3rd level spell slot, stuff like that. Potentially useful. Speaking of spell slots, don't forget that thanks to multiclassing with a 1/3 caster rate, we do have a 4th level spell slot right now, should we need it. It's too bad Alter Self doesn't benefit from upcasting, right? I'm going to talk about that later in the final thoughts. Anyways, at level 12, we would be a Wizard 7, and that means we get 4th level Wizard spells. The transmutation pick here, I think, would be Polymorph, but we might want to hold off. More on that in a second. So otherwise, grab Black Tentacles for some control and damage. Dimension Door for a big teleport for you and a friend. But I know what a lot of you are thinking. We're going Conjure Minor Elementals, aren't we? Well, not so fast. If Alter Self didn't require concentration, maybe. But I mean, taking an entire action to buff our attacks by 2d8 with Conjure Minor Elementals wouldn't do much for us without Alter Self, since we've been prioritizing intelligence, and without Alter Self, we'd be relegated to making True Strike attacks or, using Shillelagh, like I've said, and or making unarmed strikes with our Dexterity modifier, which is languishing at a 14. So yeah, this is not the build for Conjure Minor Elementals. Sorry, not sorry. All right, at level 13, we would be a Wizard 8, and that means we get another feat, and I'd personally be looking to just bump Dexterity here, I think. Getting that up to 16 is great for our Armor class, our Initiative, our Dexterity-based skills, and even things like Deflect Attack, right? Alternatively, go for Constitution for more health, and even better Constitution and Concentration saves. And don't forget that we do, again, thanks to multiclassing, get a 5th level spell slot here. Okay. At level 13, it is time for another damage report. So, what have we done to improve our damage since last check? I hate to say it, but not much. Lots of bumps to our defense and control and utility, maybe even our burst AoE damage, but yeah, with Alter Self not scaling, this is like the winter of our discontent here at 13. 4-round combat encounter gives us average damage here that's almost identical to last check. Against 10 AC, it's a 51 DPR, and against a 17 AC, it's a 46 damage per round. But hey, an 8th level Wizard with all the fun toys of 5 levels of Monk and still respectable damage if we want it isn't too shabby. And things are about to get really fun, so stay with me. At level 14, we would be a Wizard 9, and that means we get 5th level spells. And I'm just going to say PYF here. The usuals are great as always. Hold Monster, Wall of Force, Synaptic Static, etc. But level 15, Wizard 10, is where things get really interesting. Because as a transmuter, we get 2 features at level 10. 2 at level 10. Potent Stone, which lets us pick 2 benefits from our Transmuter Stone now, and even gives us a couple more benefits to choose from. Mighty Build gives us advantage on saving throws and increases our carrying capacity. Not something that we need much if we're a Goliath, I suppose, since we can grow large and all that, right? But also, there's the Tremor Sense option. We get Tremor Sense out to 30 feet. It's kind of amazing. I will take that, thank you very much. But then we get probably the best feature of them all, Shapeshifter. All right, so this one's a little complicated, and we're gonna be here for a while. Get comfy. Shapeshifter says we always have Polymorph prepared and can cast it once per day for free. Also, when we target ourselves with the spell, once per day, we can modify it to give the following additional benefits. First, while polymorphed, we can cast transmutation spells only that don't have expensive material components, okay? That might be handy in combat, jump, long strider, blindness, deafness, blink, next level, disintegrate, maybe even. That'd be fun. The even better aspect of this feature, I think, is that we can also alter polymorph so that quote, "In addition to retaining the features specified in the spell, you retain your memories and your ability to communicate. You also retain your intelligence, wisdom, and charisma scores, your proficiencies, class features, and feats." Okay, so as a reminder, yes, with Polymorph, we're told that we'd transform into a beast with a challenge rating equal to or less than our level, but then typically that our stats are all replaced by the stat block of the beast, retaining only our alignment, personality, creature type, hit points, and hit dice, and that we can't speak or cast spells. So now we keep our memories, our speech, our mental abilities, our proficiencies, and even our class features and our feats. And yeah, can cast transmutation spells. This is kind of like a souped up wild shape, isn't it? Better even than what the Moon Druid can get, though it's only once per day, and it does require concentration. But yeah, much higher challenge rating beasts. Okay, so first up, what beasts should we consider? There's really only two options, I think. Giant ape, and of course the classic T-Rex. Let's discuss each. The giant ape would give us the most temporary hit points before we drop out a polymorph, right? 168. They get a huge bonus action jump, which is nice. They can toss a boulder for some hefty AoE damage, and they have a solid multi-attack that'll deal 44 damage or so if both attacks land. All around, solid choice. And then, yeah, the Tyrannosaurus Rex. Slightly fewer hit points, but more damage with their bite and tail attack. Plus, if you hit with the bite, you automatically grapple and restrain the enemy, which is awesome, though potentially problematic in that you can't hit an enemy that you've got restrained with your tail, right? Meaning you'd need to divvy up your attacks to two different enemies. Okay, so here's maybe the more important question for us, though. Which proficiencies, class features, and feats do we retain that we care about? Well, all of your martial arts and focus features. Flurry of blows, step of the wind, etc. Can you make unarmed strikes as a T-Rex with those puny little arms? Well, don't forget, unarmed strikes, according to the rules, don't have to be a punch, right? It can be a, quote, kick, a headbutt, or similar forceful blow. Could you step on them with your massive feet and call it an unarmed strike? Okay, what about the deflect attacks feature? Would that work for us? Absolutely, it's a class feature. Slow fall? Sure. And I am here all day for a T-Rex falling off a cliff, but floating gently to the ground and landing on their feet. That would be so awesome. What about stunning strike? Sure, though our wisdom score still sucks. Lucky? Of course. What features do we not care about so much? First up, extra attack. Rules as written, taking the attack action is not the same thing as using the actions in the beast's stat block, right? This means that, for example, the T-Rex's multi-attack, where they're biting and tail whipping, or the giant ape's fist multi-attack are not the same thing as taking the attack action. And so just because we get extra attack, it doesn't necessarily mean that we could use extra attack to like bite 2 times as a T-Rex or anything, right? Unfortunately, the strictest reading of the rules would mean that if we were to take the attack action and try to make 2 unarmed strikes, we'd simply make them using our martial arts die with our strength or dexterity modifier, whichever is higher. And that really bums me out. That said, I'm sure there are plenty of tables where your DM would say, sure, for you, the attack action with an unarmed strike can be an ape's fist or the T-Rex's tail whip, but I don't think I can in good conscience assume as much. Unarmored defense probably doesn't help us much here either, at least not in T-Rex form, as our combined dexterity and wisdom modifiers wouldn't surpass the 13 AC that they have with natural armor. I guess giant apes would have a little better AC from unarmored defense. Here's a question. Does the transmuter stone work while polymorphed? Probably not. The polymorph spell specifies the target's gear melds into the new form the creature can't use or otherwise benefit from any of that equipment. Maybe you could argue that since it's still in our possession, we'd get the benefits, but it seems to me like the benefits from the stone would fall under the can't benefit from any equipment category. Work it out here with your DM, right? There's a lot here to talk about with the DM. Now, fortunately, we've got a great constitution score in our new form, a +4, so that will mollify, losing the benefits from that stone somewhat. Okay, that was a lot of info. Let's move on for now and get into combat details during our final damage report. Don't forget, we get a 6th level spell slot here thanks to multi-classing. Okay, at level 16, we would be a Wizard 11, and that means we get 6th level spells, and I mean, sure, Mass Suggestion is OP, and Contingency might be fun to use to cast Polymorph on yourself when you say the magic word, right? But dang it all, I want to be a T-Rex who casts Disintegrate out of their gaping maw when they let out a mighty roar, so logic be damned. That is totally the spell I would take here. I just got finished watching Godzilla -1, and I want to reenact that in D&D. That was a good movie, by the way, if you haven't seen it yet. Okay, level 17, finally for us, we would be a Wizard 12. That means we get another feat. And I would probably, again, just bump Dexterity or Constitution to 18. Though, admittedly, if we're often polymorphed during the fight, both of those ability scores would swap to the beasts, so maybe we don't care about those as much. Kind of depends on how many fights we have per day, so feel free to consider something like Mage Slayer for concentration disruption and legendary resistance on mental saves once per short rest. That'd be nice. And I mean, yeah, those things would work in T-Rex form for us with our once per day modification of the polymorph spell at least. Remember, we can only polymorph ourselves and get all those extra cool benefits once per day. So that's probably going to dictate what feat you take here. All right. At level 17, it's time for our final damage report, and yeah, things have changed a ton for us since last check. At this level, ideally, when combat starts, you're already a T-Rex, I'm going to assume. It lasts an hour, so again, not that difficult an assumption to make, but if you think it is, then sure, take contingency, right, instead of disintegrate and just say the magic word when you roll initiative and poof. On round 1 then, we'd run up to our primary target and chomp down with a bite. We've sadly got a lower hit chance in T-Rex form than we would have in Alter Self form. It's a plus 10 as a T-Rex, would have been plus 11, but if we hit, we deal a whopping 4d12 plus 7 damage and automatically grapple and restrain them with an escape DC of 17, so totally worth it. Extra damage plus some really nice control. We would then make a tail attack against a second target, right, for 4d8 plus 7 damage if we hit, and if we do, they're automatically knocked prone if they're huge or smaller. It's a good thing since we do not get species benefits while polymorphed, and so our Hill Giant Tumble is kind of worthless. This, though, is better because the tail whip prone is unlimited in use. We just have to hit with it and it works on bigger targets, right? And then, yes, we would spend a focus point and flurry of blows. Unfortunately, like I've said, I don't think rules as written we would be doing 4d8 plus 7, whipping with our tail on each of those flurries. I think it would just be 1d8, our martial arts die, right, plus 7, which is our T-Rex strength modifier. And I mean, that's cool, a plus 7 modifier, but yeah, I really wish it were the 4d8 instead. That would be amazing. And again, hey, talk with your DM. Maybe they'd allow it. I know I would. Who are we kidding? Of course I would. But I've actually been talking with the dungeon dudes and with Jeremy from Insight Check about how they would rule this at their table. And, we're a little bit divided. Everyone can kind of see the logic behind allowing the tail damage, right? Or, maybe there's a compromise here and you go giant ape instead of T-Rex because maybe it makes more sense to your DM that you would be getting the same amount of damage when making an unarmed strike with your fists as you would when you take the multi-attack action with your fists. I am not going to assume that we are getting the extra damage here, but I'm willing to bet that a lot of you would. And hey, 1d8 plus 7 times 2, right, for a bonus action, still not bad. I mean, if everything landed, and I'm still going to assume that we have advantage on all attacks between our familiar, our luck points, and knocking them prone, we would deal 4d12 plus 6d8 plus 28 damage every round. Though some of that is to a secondary target, right? That's awesome. That's good damage. Averaged over a 4-round combat encounter, against enemies with a 10 armor class, we would do 86 damage per round, and against an 18, it would be a 77 DPR. And that's some nice scaling since last check, but compared to other DPR builds to date at this level, it's still only middle of tier 3. Now, for what it's worth, if your DM did allow your unarmed strike damage to use the 4d8 tail damage, it would be 116 and 104 DPR respectively, which is much better, sure, but by no means overpowered in my opinion. Remember, you can only polymorph like this once per day, and I mean, I have builds topping 100 damage per round at level 13. We're 17 now. Those kind of numbers would put the build in mid-tier 2 territory at this level. Now, granted, there are other great reasons to be polymorphed aside from the damage, right? We're tanky as all get out with all of those extra temporary hit points regardless of the damage we're doing. And we're probably grappling and restraining an enemy every single round with a pretty tough to escape DC. So we're bringing survivability and control and solid damage. On top of that, we're mostly a full wizard with all of the potential utility, control, and AoE damage that can bring. So we are far from a one-trick pony here. The question might be, is the one trick we've been building around, being a melee fighter, at least some of the time, really worth building around? Let's discuss in the final thoughts, shall we? First of all, the tier score for this build, if you take the damage that they do against every AC that we calculate for at each of the 4 damage reports, average it into one big number, we end up with a 45. And that actually makes this the new lowest tier score damage dealer that I've ever built. But does that mean it's actually the weakest character ever? Not remotely. The reality is sometimes the timing of those damage reports benefit some characters and hurt others, right? This build takes a minute to get off the ground damage-wise, sure. But if I did the damage reports at levels 8 and 15, for example, this build would have looked a lot better by comparison, right? Since that's when they were getting their power spikes. I'm not saying they would be like a tier 1 build or anything, but the levels at which I check in do have an impact on how builds seem to compare to one another, no doubt. That said, sure, there are some concerns about the single target or even double target damage capacity of this build. See, one big problem with monk damage scaling is that even though they can eventually make a decent number of attacks, unless you can find a way to add more damage to those attacks via multiclassing, whether via spells or barbarian rage or whatever, then just making more relatively weak attacks doesn't actually keep up very well damage-wise with other damage-focused builds, right? What's more, a lot of spells that do deal damage on every hit are hard to pair well with the monk's features. Hunter's Mark and Hex add a d6 to every hit, but since they require a bonus action to both cast and then transfer to another target, all of the time, right? It conflicts with our Flurry of Blows, which we really need to use every round if we want to get the most out of those kinds of spells. The Paladin's Divine Favor would be amazing, but multiclassing Paladin and Monk is next to impossible thanks to the minimum ability score requirements. For spells then, that leaves us pursuing things like Spirit Shroud, or of course Conjure Minor Elementals, but those take such a huge level investment to get to that you're left without much damage scaling for a long time in your monk's career as you try to build towards them, right? On the surface then, one might think that pairing the new Transmuter Wizard ability to get 2d6 damage from their unarmed strikes with the Alter Self spell, like we've been building around today, is exactly what the monk needs. It's kind of like getting Hunter's Mark damage on all of your unarmed strikes, right? Problem solved? But not really, because Alter Self requires you to use your spellcasting stat for the hit and damage, and since we picked the spell up as a Transmuter Wizard, that means intelligence. And so unless you're building a monk who ignores dexterity and wisdom to favor intelligence, you're going to struggle. And yeah, that's exactly what we did, and well, we struggled a little bit at first until we got to level 8.
Truly, you have a dizzying intellect. Wait till I get going! Where was I?
Now, some of you might be thinking that we would have been better off just using Alter Self as kind of a nice little damage bump on our way to Spirit Shroud at Wizard 5 and Conjure Minor Elementals at Wizard 7, and you'd be right if we hadn't needed to favor intelligence over dexterity for the damage for Alter Self, right? But since we did, by the time we got to Spirit Shroud and Conjure Minor Elementals, we didn't want to use them because our dexterity wasn't high enough. And nothing in either of those spells allows us to use our spellcasting modifier for the attack and the damage, right? So you see the problem. In the end, trying to make use of the buffed Alter Self that Transmuters get doesn't work all that well. Here's what I wish Wizards of the Coast would have done and suggest that you allow at your tables. Make it so that the player can use their spellcasting modifier for the hit and damage of Alter Self, but they don't have to. In that case, yes, this would be a fantastic way to keep the monk scaling going with this multiclass. We get a nice damage bump at Wizard 3, another one at Wizard 5, and an even better one at Wizard 7. And then, thanks to the fun new polymorph modifications Transmuters get, we get the best bump of all at Wizard 10 if you allow unarmed strikes to be made as though they were tail attacks from your T-Rex self, which I think you should. So yes, in the end, while I really love the changes here on paper to Transmuters, an Altered Self buff that does 2d6 on unarmed strikes, and being able to polymorph yourself and keep your class features so you can make extra attacks, etc., in practice, the features are still a little tricky to build around. A wizard doesn't get extra attack or bonus action attacks, so using Alter Self just to make a single 2d6 plus intelligence attack on your turn with your action is still bad and not worth using. But multiclassing with something in order to get more attacks is still kind of janky. So if you want to build around it, I would suggest either allowing Alter Self to use the spellcasting stat to hit if the player wants, like I've talked about, and or sure, let it benefit from upcasting. Whether to add more attacks as you upcast it or increase the damage maybe, or both. Or, maybe even allow you to not have to use concentration for it if cast at a high enough level so that you could still concentrate on something else. like polymorph. Otherwise, yeah, it's just kind of hard to make it good. But you know what? Maybe I'm underselling it. I mean, hey, solid defensive features, great boosts to concentration, lots of pretty hard-hitting attacks once you get the core of the build in place, and then being mostly wizard for most of this build with everything that entails. I think the build could be a lot of fun and super versatile. It would potentially really mix up the regular just stand back and cast spells wizard play, at least for some combat encounters during the day. Enough at least to keep it both interesting and still like good and viable without being overpowered, right? But that's the build for the week. So I'd love to know what you think in the comments. Do you think we're underselling this? Is it better than the spreadsheet shows? I think so. But I think you'd really need to play this in game to really get a good feel for it, right? Anyways, love you all. Thank you so much for all that you do for me and for this channel. It means so much to me. It really does. I hope that you have a fantastic day and a really great week. And if you don't, I hope you hang in there. Please do not give up. I hope that you will do good and that you will be kind and that I see you again very soon. But until then, take care. Bye. England swings like a pendulum do. Bobbies on bicycles 2 by 2. Westminster Abbey, the Tower, Big Ben. The rosy red cheeks of the little children. The tower is not Big Ben. The tower is Elizabeth Tower, Roger. The Big Ben is the bell that's inside, you silly American tourist. By Roger Miller. He's like an old school country artist that my dad used to listen to all the time when I was growing up. He's most famous for, at least among me and probably my generation and younger, for being the rooster minstrel in Robin Hood, Disney's Robin Hood. I'm pretty sure that England's loss in the World Cup is 100% my fault. While we were there, they were undefeated. The day we left is the day that they lost to Argentina. So sorry, all of you England fans. No, I want to say which stands for non-detection. Though split up, though some of that is to just, though some of that, the best one of all, we get the best bump at all. We get the best bump of all.